Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Mischief with Carolyn and Brandon. You're listening to episode 195, and it's a good one. A conversation with world-renowned criminal psychologist, forensic criminologist, and author who's widely recognized as a leading expert on serial killers, psychopathy, and violent crime, Dr. Eric Hickey. Now, let me tell you, that's a huge resume, and yes, it is, but he is so down to earth, and if you have a curious bone in your body, you are going to want to listen to this interview all the way through. It's one of those conversations that went off the rails in such a good way, meaning we had planned to talk about a specific case, which we never even got to, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. Here's just a sample.
Because of that feeling I had, we became friends. I went to Chicago with him, spent a week there, and interviewed him. Because of that interview, I got to interview his mother. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that interview changed everything for me in terms of understanding some dark, dark sides of necrophilia and
But
killers.
Here's the thing that I want to bring to my audience, and I'm working on a book that is how women can use their intuition, this is not woo-woo.
No, this is intuition.
It's intuition, empathy, and sometimes it starts with childhood trauma that they experience themselves, where they need to read the room. So they really pick up cues, body language, so they understand. And of course, it's not just women, but
But primarily that's the primary target.
Yeah. So I picture you reading you, like from a young age, you were probably very empathetic and could read. And there's a journey of building that and using those skills to benefit you, instead of someone saying, oh, well, you're too sensitive, or you're too deep, you're too much of a deep thinker. It's become this negative thing instead of this really positive thing of being able to channel that into, your benefit, in whatever you're doing in life.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is our backgrounds. I mean, I was raised by a single mom, and she was fantastic. And I never knew my father growing up. I never saw him. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was coming back from France. Been living over there for a couple of years. And I was in an airport. I was Montreal airport, waiting for my flight. And I was standing there waiting for my flight and looked across the way. I saw a man standing there, and he looked very unhappy. I had a feeling about him. I don't know why. I had a feeling about him. So I'm going to go talk to this guy. Maybe cheer him up. So I walk over to him. And as I got close to him, I had this impression I should ask him a question. So, excuse me, sir, is your name Granville? And he goes, yes, it is. How'd you know my name? I said, you're my father. And he looked at me for a long time, goes, I am your father, aren't I? I said, yes, you are. And that's how we met. I'd never met him before. I mean, he left when I was a few months old, so I didn't know him. And he had no contact with the family. He moved to another part of Canada. Now, that clip you just heard was so fun for me because I'm writing a book about my true crime work, and it's interviews like this with experts like Dr. Hickey that continually inspire my work. And again, I go back to that curiosity and his ability to be so open and excited about sharing his insights as I try to unpack this larger idea of a person really embracing their emotional intelligence as a strategic superpower. I know that sounds like super grandiose, but it's not in a manipulative way. It's coming from a place of absolute confidence, control, and it's a subtle offense, not defense. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. You just employed these skills that you've been working on your entire life and then watch amazing things unfold. Carl Jung referred to emotional empaths as sort of like architects of human behavior. They see patterns and are able to read, influence, and navigate relationships and situations. And this can be directed toward really positive outcomes that
can improve their lives. Which is all to say, this conversation is for anyone who has ever been told or been made to feel that they think too much, or they're just too sensitive, they're just too much. So here's that conversation. Great. Dr. Hickey, it is so wonderful to see you in person, well, via Zoom. If you want, let's start off with you saying your name and title, basically how you would like me to refer to you in the podcast, and just you have such a huge career, so many books, which I have ordered the book that you suggested, and it's going to be coming from Amazon, and I can't wait to dive into it. But just talk a little bit about your background.
My name is Dr. Eric Hickey. I'm a criminal psychologist, and I work at Walden University. I'm a professor there in a PhD program in forensic psychology. I've been there about maybe 10 or 12 years now. When I first started my career, I started off as more in the area of criminology, and I was very fascinated about the psychology piece of it. And over the years, kind of wedded them together. When I started in the field, there was no field of forensic psychology. It was just they're all separate. There was sociology and psychology and criminology. They're all separate places to go. And over the years, my colleagues, myself, we were kind of not intending to, but we sort of put this thing together, and now we have our own national meetings, and we have our own field of study and research. Forensic psychology is sort of an aggregate of knowledge and tools that we use to understand crime, criminals, and victims. So it's really been an interesting journey for me to be in this field. I mean, for me, it's such a fascinating place to be. I mean, it's not for everybody, but for me, it's just been such a blessing in my life, because I never thought when I was being raised in Canada, Eastern Canada, a small town, that I would end up in the United States being a criminal psychologist. But here I am. So
how do you, when you said put this thing together with some colleagues, how do you differ from, say, the FBI's BAU? Like what is the kind of what's your journey in that respect?
Absolutely fascinating journey with the Bureau. I've never been a police officer or an agent. I've trained FBI, and I've worked with FBI on cases as a consultant. So it's been an interesting journey, because when I started out, it was way back in the day. When I'm talking about way back, way back. Bob Ressler, former military colonel, Army, he had left the military and joined the FBI as an agent. And I didn't know him at that point, but he was an interesting guy. I got to know him later. He was the one that interviewed Ed Kemper. He was the one he was a bit of a prima donna. I think that's why I liked him so much. He wasn't just your run-of-the-mill ordinary guy. He was different, and he was his own person. And when he first started out, he was interested in serial murder, but they didn't even call it serial murder. And I think he was the one that coined the term serial murder.
Yeah. So for our audience here, Robert Ressler is Manhunter, right?
Yes.
That series based with
John
about
Douglas.
it's like one of my favorite series that they've done, but he was the one, along with John Douglas, right, who started the BAU, and also and she always gets kind of cut out of this, and I'm spacing on her name, the nurse who
Ann Burgess.
Ann Burgess, thank you so much, because she is so critical in this, right?
Yes, Ann
that
Burgess.
kind of triad grouping were the ones that went and interviewed Ed Kemper and other serial killers, serial rapists, and said, "Hey, let's get a database going. Let's get profiles going," right?
So more specifically about that, Ressler, when he first started, he did not have permission to collect information about serial killers, but he was curious, like I am. He's just curious, so he started collecting information about them and putting them in files and hiding the files in the bathroom in the basement of the FBI headquarters in D.C. because he had permission to do it. And he did that for a while. And then along comes a new director. He said, "I heard about what you're doing down in the basement. You can bring the files upstairs," and that's what he did. And so that's when they really started getting into it. And he wanted to interview Ed Kemper. Ed Kemper turned out to be probably the best interview they ever did back in those days of serial killers. I know, because I talked to Bob about this personally, about how his experience was interviewing at Kemper. I'm not sure if you're aware of what happened.
How he was left alone in the room with him?
Right. Because Kemper is a very nice person on the surface, and he doesn't kill men. He killed his grandfather, but he doesn't kill men. And but he kind of played him a bit. And I mean, if you're in a room with someone who's killed a lot of women, a lot of people, and this man is almost twice your size, and he's not in shackles, but everybody likes Kemper. So he's sitting there, and they have this interview. And it goes well. It's a small locked interview room with a little glass window, and it went well. And so Bob says, "It's Kim, thanks very much for the interview. It's time to leave." And Kimber looks out the window and says, "Oh, the guard's gone. He's gone to get his lunch probably. Why don't we sit back down and we'll talk some more?" And so Bob says, "Sure." So he sits back down. Where do you think Ed Kemper was standing at that very moment?
Over him?
Standing right behind him.
Oh my gosh.
Now you're in a locked room with a man that's 6'9", and you're 5'7", and you're 5'8", and you're 175 pounds, and he's 300 pounds, and he's a serial killer, and you actually turn your back on him in a locked room. Why would you do that? Because he didn't see him as a threat. Immediately, Kemper puts him into a headlock. Walks up behind him and just puts him in a headlock like this, and he says, he started to squeeze, and he just whispered. He said, you know, I said, I'm going to squeeze not too hard, but I want to show you how I kill my victims. And Bob told me, he said, so he said, he squeezed a little bit, and then they let me go. He said, and then I just snapped their necks really quick. I snapped their necks. And he sat down. Now, Bob told me, he said, when I was sitting there trying to compose myself because that upset me. He said, I'm sitting there, and Kimber sits back down, and he's only like a foot from me. He's smiling at me, and all of a sudden, he stopped smiling. And I asked him, "What's the matter?" He goes, "Well, I'm thinking, you know, I'm in a prison. I mean, I'm on death row. I've killed a lot of people. If I kill you, an FBI agent, I'll be a hero in the prison, won't I?" At which point, Kemper starts to lean toward him, and Bob thought he was going to die. At which point, Bob made another big mistake. He said he looked at Kemper. He says, "Mr. Kemper, I must warn you that I've been trained in martial arts by the FBI." Now, that was a huge mistake. Not because it was a challenge. For you and me, it would be a challenge, but not for him. Because Kemper knew we could kill him. That was never an issue. It was far darker than that. What do you think it was? What just happened?
Well, the power dynamic
Hmm.
is this is fun for me because you're testing me. I feel like I want to
Yes, I am.
pass this. You're
Yes.
like totally playing me now. Oh my gosh.
No, no, but this is good because most people don't get it. It's understandable,
Yeah,
but it's
no, I
so
know. I
dark.
feel like I want to get it so badly. I want to
Oh
like
yeah,
prove that
no,
I know
it's
my shit here.
it's hiding in plain sight for you. What
So
just happened?
it's
And
something
you're
to
on
do
to it.
with
You're on to it.
power.
Yes, but okay. So how did you know that? How did you know that?
Because how do I know that?
Well, no. How did Kemper know? How did Kemper know it was a shift in power? Okay, I gave you that clue.
Because they're playing each other. They're master manipulators, both of them in different realms. He's saying like it's been a cat and mouse the entire time, right? And
I wouldn't call Bob a master manipulator. He was very down to earth. He was solid as a rock. He knew what he was doing, but he hadn't done his homework.
okay, so he didn't know Kemper's psychology and what would make
Not
him tick.
he wasn't. They weren't used to interviewing people who were highly psychopathic. Now, I'm not saying Kemper was a true psychopath. He wasn't, but he was high in the list.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, you're almost there.
I know. Well, I'm thinking about it from my own. If I was interviewing
Yeah,
Kemper
and he did that to you.
and he did that to me,
And
what would I do? And I would not challenge him in that way because I want him to think that he's the smartest person in the room. I want him to
yes,
think that he has, you know,
exactly.
control over what's happening.
And that's what I do when I'm with them. I make sure they understand that they're in charge of the interview. I get
They're in
exactly what,
charge.
and I get everything I need.
I know, and that's why this is what brought us together. I still want to stay on this, but when I saw that interview with you and you were talking to Jeffrey Dahmer's mom, and she's like, he never meant to kill anyone or whatever, however
No,
she
no,
said
he
that, and you're
meant to kill
like,
them. He didn't. He never hurt them. He killed them.
yeah, right. And you're like, I know. And so
I,
you're letting her know immediately, I understand what you're saying.
I expected her to tell me that, and it was right on. I suspected that. So getting back to Kemper now.
Okay. Okay. I think that like just the way that if it were me in there, I wouldn't want to. I don't know what his specific psychology is. And so him saying that he's a master, he's been trained to, you know, basically, he's got whatever his credentials are. He's basically making himself more powerful than Kemper. And I would think that that somehow imbalances the power.
Well, you're right on this power part. He definitely, when Bob said, I've been training martial arts. You know, I must warn you, I've been training martial arts. Kimber immediately knew something about Bob. Immediately knew.
Mhm.
And by saying that, Bob played a card
Mm.
they didn't have to play.
Yeah.
And what did he show? He showed
Fear.
fear. He showed
Yes.
fear. The
Yes.
moment he said that, he showed fear, which immediately Kemper knew now there was a power shift
Mm.
and he was now in charge. At
Mm.
which point Kemper looks at him and says, Mr. Agent Wrestler, I must tell you something. Obviously, you didn't do your homework. Had you done your homework, you would have known that on two occasions I literally tore their heads off their shoulders with my bare hands.
Yeah.
At which point, Bob told me, he says, I could feel perspiration on my face.
Mm.
I honestly thought I was going to die.
Hmm.
And
Well, and it seems like such a hollow. You're absolutely right. It's so hollow because he literally just had him in his neck. He could have already killed him.
oh, but
And
this was all about a power thing. And
yeah.
so when Kemper looks over and sees the guard come back, Bob gets up and he goes to the door, bangs on the door, and the door starts to open. As it opens, Kemper walks up behind him and touches his elbow and leans in and says two words to him in his ear. Just kidding. I've seen this done and other recently. Recently I interviewed another serial killer who did that to the investigating detectives. And the detective told me, he said, I was absolutely, I've been doing this for 26 years as a homicide detective. I've never been more afraid in all my life. I
Mhm.
realized that he could kill me in a heartbeat. I said, he was just playing you. This was just about showing that he could, but of course he would never do that because he likes you. And Kemper
Mhm.
liked Bob Bressler. Bob Bressler was great. It just, and it all could have been avoided if Bob had simply said to him, right, and just laughed it off. He would have moved on to something else. But he
Mhm.
played it out because he could. It was just a game. Just a game.
Mhm.
I've been in rooms where people have played me like that. And, I learned from the beginning, well, over time, you know, how not to fall into those traps. Because when you're dealing with a true psychopath, it's a very different interview than if you're interviewing, say, someone who's a sociopath or a common criminal. They have different levels and also you always go in prepared. And Bob wasn't trained in psychopathy. He
Mhm.
didn't understand at that point. I mean, he was a great agent. He really was one of the very best. Yeah, I really liked him a lot. Anyway, so
Well, what's interesting to me is that I don't want to get right to Manny because I just feel like there's so many interesting things that I could talk to you about. But like, I was listening to some of his taped interviews, and
it's
he
Kemper.
was saying how he saw a girl and she was smoking a cigarette, and the way she tapped it out, and
He,
he sussed her up immediately that he was going to
yes,
go up to her and approach her as being a college student because he knew that she would like that. He had saw with
yes.
her nonverbal cues, saw like how to play her and how to get her defenses down, how to and I wonder if not only did Wrestler show his cards with his fear, but underestimated the massive intelligence, and I'm not trying to glorify these serial killers, but like there's this empathic ability to not empathic, I don't know for lack of
Yeah,
a better word, but is it, he identified he identified the vulnerability or the ego of
yes,
this girl in like seconds and was able to know exactly how to approach her to get her away. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do. And so keep in mind that there aren't too many true psychopaths in our society. There are a lot of sociopaths. Kemper, because he was a necrophile, on the hair scale, we did a study and we rated him. He was like, I think a 26 maybe. He was pretty high. I mean, a 30 is a true psychopath. But the reason he wasn't a true psychopath is because he's a necrophile. And necrophiles are not psychopaths because they have attachments to people, even dead people. They have attachments. I mean, Kemper loved his mom. I've never been interviewed a serial killer who was a necrophile, who was a psychopath. But they can still be predators, of course, and they can be manipulators. But they're not because true psychopaths are very sadistic, and they have no empathy. They have no connection. Kemper loved his mom. He hated her, but he also loved her.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different kind of mindset. So when you get to that level, when you're interviewing a true psychopath, you can only use logic and reason. When you're interviewing a sociopath, you can use emotion because they have connections they have attachment to people. So it's a little different. It's a different type of approach, and they're all predators, but they do things differently. How they do
For
this.
for the listener, this is always one that is like, what is the absolute the dumbing it down of the difference between a psychopath and a
So
sociopath? If you can,
look, a thumbnail sketch of that.
yeah.
So uh, sociopaths are people who often don't learn from their mistakes. They have long histories of criminal behavior. Um, they're emotional. They're average to below average intelligence, generally speaking.
Hmm.
Um, they uh, they do a variety of crimes. Where when you're looking at someone who's a true psychopath, um, they're very sadistic. They have zero empathy. They don't get anything about the victims at all. They don't have any connection. Most of them don't anyway. Um, but they're average to above average intelligence. So we make movies about them, like Ted Bundy.
So
Okay.
you would consider Ted Bundy a psychopath
Oh, a true psychopath. Yeah, he was a 34 on the hair scale. He was a 34.
out of 30?
No, out of 40. It's
Out of
40
40.
points.
Okay.
On the
Okay.
hair scale, 0 to 40 points. The average person, hopefully you are, like a 4 and an 8. Okay. Yeah,
Whoa.
that's the typical. That's the average. And then you have occasional criminals. Then you have sociopaths, 18 to 29, and then you have true psychopaths on that highest level. Very few people are true psychopaths because they're absolute true sadistic predators, and you get a lot of them in there, but you get some. You get people like Kemper and Dahmer. They and all these necrophiles when they kill the ones who kill, they all kill the same way. You know, I asked one guy. I asked one Larry Hall. He's on Netflix. He was now I think it's on Apple TV, but called him Blackbird. I asked him, when you were killing all these female college students, did you ever look at their faces when you're killing them? He says, no, why would I do that? He was quite surprised. I asked him that question. Why would I do that? Because he wasn't sadistic. He had no interest in their suffering. In fact, he didn't want them to suffer. He just wanted them to die so he could have their bodies when they're still warm, but dead. And that led me because of that interview, and he killed 34 college students around the country.
Mm.
Yeah. And so from there, I went, and because of that, I got involved with some other research and did a book on necrophilia. But I was looking also at men who, like the Green River Killer, he was a necrophile, right? But
Yeah.
he buried them as soon as he killed them. He buried them to cool off for a couple of days. And then he went back and dug them up and had sex with them and then mutilated the corpses. A different type, right?
Mm.
And I have a very dark sense of humor, right? So when I not about the victims themselves, but just how they choose what they're comfortable with. And then there's others. I've got photographs of this. Of In one case, the man had a master's degree, was living with his parents. This was a Russian case, and he would go to graveyards and he'd dig up young teen girls, been buried for maybe 30 years. So he just had the skeletons. He had 26 of them in his house, dressed in clothing from newer graves. And why would he pick young teen girls? And why that? Because when he was, I think, eight or nine, his uncle took him to a funeral and of this young teen girl, and physically took his face and forced him to kiss her goodbye on the lips. And that traumatized him. And so as an adult, here he is, an intelligent man going around digging up young teen girls, been buried for 30 years. And so much of this would go back to childhood. So much of this. It's just fascinating. We could talk about this for days. It's just so interesting. Yeah.
So you mentioned the Blackbird killer. Is that what he's called? The one
Yeah.
who did
Yeah. Well, the video on Netflix, they call it Blackbird, but it's Larry Hall is his name.
So I've never heard of Larry Hall,
Oh
but
my gosh.
but you have this look. But obviously most of us have heard of Ted Bundy. Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
put that lens on the true crime audience. Why
Sure.
is it that we are fascinated with the Ted Bundys, that there's certain docs that just keep certain investigations that, people just can't get enough of them. They just can't.
Yeah, that's true. And so Bundy, Dahmer, other names kind of go. I mean, I was I was a consultant on the Unabomber task force, and I mentioned the Unabomber today, and people go, "Who was that?" They, but Ted Bundy is a household name, has been for many, many years. I think he was executed in 1989, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, interesting. So Bundy was back in the 70s, and I was back in the 70s, and he, because he was a traveling serial killer. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, he traveled across the country, different places, and he was very intelligent, and he learned the craft of manipulating people. So he was able to kind of fit in. I mean, he could fool anybody. He was really good at it. And that's why he put his arm in a cast. He could lure people into his car. And he was a semi-handsome guy, apparently. I mean, I've seen his pictures. He changed his looks a lot. I mean, he got accepted to law school, but he didn't go. He just wanted to look normal. He was on a political campaign up in Seattle. And this was the beginning. At that point, we really weren't looking at serial killers, right? This was sort of oh my gosh, what? And once that all broke open, Bundy, and we started looking at them, and Bob Bressler and the BAU, and they started looking at them, we realized, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch before this, before Bundy. And we go back to, 1890, we can find them. We come back. And so it was just like this floodgate. So there was all these investigations trying to find these other serial killers. And then, of course, the media got a hold of it. We started making movies about them. Hollywood got a hold of it. And it just took off because crime sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially because Bundy was such a brutal, and he didn't go after prostitutes, right? He went after middle class, upper class, educated women. That was his priority. He would never have lowered his standards to go after somebody that was a
Mm-hmm.
prostitute. He wanted women that were a challenge to him. And so he really, of course, he hated women of that class. He felt that they looked down upon him. And this is all in his imagination, but this is what he did. But he a true predator, and how he could, I mean, I saw that interview with Reverend Dobson, his last interview, and Dobson went in there to get him to say that pornography made him do what he did. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Bundy played him like a fiddle, just played him. And if you watch the interview carefully, you can see how he's looking him around the room, every time there's any noise, he's looking, because he's a predator. He's always looking at his surroundings, and he's saying, yes, I'm responsible, but pornography, changed my life. But pornography didn't make him do that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, was it an influence? It might have been an influence, but it didn't make him do it. It was a choice he made. And Bundy enjoyed the killing. Now, enjoyed the killing, but over time, and he kind of started drinking more. And of course, he ended up killing his last victim was a 12-year-old girl. But he traveled. The fact that he was able to escape twice,
Yeah.
twice,
Yeah.
and that was huge. How could he do that? Because everybody liked Bundy. In fact, the judge, when he sentenced him to death, said, "You would have been a great attorney in my courtroom. I wish you the very best." Here's a man who killed probably 35 women. He's wishing him the very best. Even Bundy, even the judge was amazed by him and kind of played by him. Why would you wish somebody who killed 35 people the best? And you're going
No,
to,
I know. It's like it's like Kemper, where Robert Ressler turned his back on him because he
he just,
didn't perceive him as a threat, and that's what they use to manipulate their victims into, the
yeah, it's
sling and all of that.
nice people on the surface. And Kemper said, he said, during that time he was killing all these women, he said, because they were hitchhiking a lot. That's where he got his victims. He said, they look in the car and they judge me not to be that guy because
Hmm.
I'm a nice person. And they get in the car and they would take me to their deaths. He said, on one occasion, there were two women in the car with me. And
Hmm.
and I drove out to a place where I'd like to kill them, and they knew something terrible was going to happen, and so I took one of them out of the car into the woods, and while I'm in there killing her, I come back and she locked the door. I said, "Oh, unlock the door." So she unlocked the door, and I took her out and killed her as well. I mean, just because they have such a, they can be so captivating over and so terrorized. They traumatize these victims. Yeah, I can't imagine being a woman and being in a car alone with someone like that. So, one of Bundy's victims, fortunately, she was able to escape. It was in Salt Lake City. She was in his Volkswagen. She was able to get out of the car, but I think she was the only one who ever escaped. And he traveled around the country, and so because of his story, people were so amazed, horrified, and amazed that they just when they executed him, they had Bundy cues. They had parties, Bundy
Hmm.
cues,
Hmm.
and there were stickers that said, I'll buckle up when Bundy buckles up,"
Hmm.
in their
For
cars.
speaking about the electric chair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I'll put my seatbelt on when he puts his belt on.
Let,
Electric chair.
let's get back to this idea of women being victims, because obviously, 80% of the true crime audience are women. There's what do you make of that, and what can you, because I think that we've seen time and time again where we don't want to believe it's the nice guy. We want to believe that it's the guy in the wrinkled raincoat who looks like a creep and who has fangs. You know what I mean? Like that's who we, when really it's like, that's what Gary Ridgway had said to, when he was being interviewed, was like, I made them believe that I was not a threat, and he used his son as props in his truck, and showed them his license because he had no intention of letting them live. And so, like, it's a question that I always think about, where break down why you think women are so interested in true crime, including myself, because I think it's very, I feel like I'm turning it back on you with that mirror of like,
No, no, I think that's important. Um, uh, how do women protect themselves from these types of people? Well, I think it's really important to understand from the male perspective, healthy men, mentally healthy men, we don't try to be alone with women. Okay, that should be a red flag. Um, we're not we're not going to go out. I mean, I would avoid places like bars where and avoiding strangers like that, because you're much more likely to get picked up in a bar, and they might give you a drug or something. They might do it that way, but a lot of these killers don't. They don't do that. They don't have to go to bars. They will walk into a store. Um, there was a, in fact, there was a show years ago on television. They talked about how you could go walk into a store, and talk a woman to come into your car. I know I could walk into a store somewhere, like a shopping mall, and give me 10 minutes, and I'll have somebody walk up to my car with me because I'm a nice guy. They would trust me. I'm a very nice person. And so they did that. And they showed how women would walk out to this guy's car, and they said, "You realize that you're with a total stranger. You don't know who this person is." Bunny did it. I mean, he faked his arm was broken. Please help my book with my books to help me to get to my car, and then they would do it, and they were doomed.
How much of that is part of, and I have to retrain, I've spent time retraining myself with this whole idea of that it's not only just the nice guy or you don't perceive them as a threat, but then our training as girls and young women to be nice. We've been trained to be nice. Like if someone asks for help or if someone, you know,
Well,
okay, even if your red flag goes up, like I don't know this person and I'm walking, like the woman that escaped Bundy, she looked at like, oh, he smelled like he had been drinking alcohol. He seemed kind of sketchy, even though he claimed to be a detective, and her spidey sense was going
yeah,
crazy.
but
Like, no way, no way, no way. And that's what saved her, is her listening to that instinct and going against like this authority figure, because he knew, because it's not just the nice guy, it's also, authority figures too. If somebody were to say, hey, I need your help, I'm a so and so, and represented themselves as someone in authority, and you would just believe them, where, you know what I mean?
well, we train our children not to go with strangers, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So if I role playing here, if I liked little children and I wanted to abduct little children, I know that you've trained your child not to go with me, right? Not to go with that stranger. So I'm going to go to your child after school because you forgot to pick him up on time. And I'm going to show him a picture of my lost kitten. I lost my kitten over here somewhere in the woods. They're going to go looking for the kitten, and I'm just going to go with them. They're not going to go with me. They're going to go looking for that kitten. They do it all the time because they know not to go with strangers. They know not to get in a police car with a stranger because they're trained well. But oh my gosh, the kitten trick works all the time. So, unfortunately, we don't lose a lot of children that way. But we get 125 people who are just abducted every year, kids, and usually they're killed. So again, this is a whole other conversation. We talk about men who like to kill children. Those are misopeds because they're very sadistic. They're child molesters, but they also kill the children. There's not a lot of them, but it only takes one to kill your child, right? But getting back to the protecting yourself, if you're going to be like a woman has a right to do what she wants. She can walk out in the public. I have no problem with that. And I remember this experience I was having when I was in Indiana. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm on the campus. I'm writing finishing up my first book on serial murder. Okay, my first edition. And so it's 2 in the morning. It's winter, and I come out in the huge square in the campus area, and I started walking, and there was a woman that came out at a different angle. So she's in front of me, and there's nobody there, just me and her, and she's walking ahead of me. She doesn't know who I am, and so she walks faster. Well, I'm a fast walker, and I'm already still overtaking her. I sensed her fear, and she's walking faster, and I'm walking fast, and I knew that at some point I was going to overtake her, and I knew that she was terrified. And immediately I said, "It's just me, Dr. Hickey. It's okay. It's just me." And I could see the relief. I could tell that she was okay. Thank you, because she was afraid because she was alone, or so she could be accosted. So I'm saying you have a right to go where you want to go, but use common sense. There are some very dangerous people out there, and so that's how Larry Hall did. He would go around looking for women who were walking alone at night, especially at night, sometimes in the daytime. But just you have to use your common sense. I don't worry about that for myself. I can go out, even when I was a teenager, I can go hitchhiking. I was never concerned about my physical safety because I'm a male. And so this is the way it is. So you just have to pay attention. And by the way, one of my colleagues, you must have heard of Gavin DeBecker. He wrote the book, The Gift of Fear. And his book basically says, pay attention to your fear. Don't, that's a good thing. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel something, pay attention to that. I've only had that maybe once when I've been interviewing serial killers, only once when I realized I probably shouldn't get too much closer. Other
Which
than that,
serial killer was it?
his name was Juan uh, Juan Juan Cortez. He was the MacArthur Park murderer.
Hmm.
He killed 7 men. And I interviewed him in a Supermax prison in California. And I just remember he wasn't looking at me, he was looking down. And I wanted to look at me. And he wasn't going to say yes or no to my interview. And I needed more from him. So I thought maybe I just need to slip around the table and sit beside him. As I started to move my hands across the table, he looked up immediately. I froze. I realized I'm not going to move another inch because I thought he will attack me if I come closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the only one I ever had that concern about.
How much of this, I'm always so intrigued with, it's so much more under the surface body language, micro expressions than it is verbal. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what, how would you describe that?
There's how they look in their eyes when they look at you. They look you straight in the eye and they lie to you. And and when they don't lie, that always like, why aren't you lying to me? There must be some other angle because normally they're going to lie or they're going to embellish. But they have this look like they're playing you. You just get this feeling about them. And so over time, I think investigators, I mean, police detectives, homicide detectives, over time, as they interview people, they get comfortable understanding how people react to those interviews. So it's part of experience. For me, it's always been because I get feelings about people. I
Well,
get
I'm a
these.
huge student of Carl Jung.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
love, I
I
love, I
I,
love
I
it. So I
was
feel like it's part of being a good interviewer. It's part of
yes.
it, it's channeling, and I'm sensing that from you too, of
I was.
obviously.
Um, I don't know if I told you this, but I was in a store one day. Was in like a Macy's store, and I see a guy. Now I'm a critical thinker, right? And that's really important that you have those skills and you develop those critical thinking skills. So as I walk him by him, I thought he looks interesting. I thought I have a feeling about him. I should speak to him. So I just out of the blue walked over this total stranger, never seen him before in my life. I said, "Oh, um, I just thought say hi." And so we started talking. He was from Chicago. I said, "Oh, I'm going there next week on another case. What brings you to California?" He said, "My mother tried to kill herself. So I came out here to California to take care of her." Immediately, I knew who he was. I said, "Oh my gosh, you're Jeffrey Dahmer's brother, aren't you?" He goes, "Yes, I am. How did you know that?" I said, "I didn't know. I've never seen him before. I had a feeling about you, and now I know. I did a documentary about your brother last week, but I didn't know about you, but now I know." Because of that feeling I had, we became friends. I went to Chicago with him, spent a week there, and interviewed him. Because of that interview, I got to interview his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that interview changed everything for me in terms of understanding some dark, dark sides of necrophilia and
But
killers.
here's the thing that I want to bring to my audience, and I'm working on a book that is how women can use their intuition, their this is not woo woo.
No,
This
this is
is
intuition.
it's intuition, empathy, and sometimes it starts with childhood trauma that they experience themselves where they need to read the room so they really pick up cues, body language, so they understand. And of course it's not just women, but I
Yeah, but,
I'm
but primarily that's the primary
yeah,
target.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
There are
like
men.
I picture you reading you like from a young age you were probably very empathetic and could read, and there's a journey of building that and using those skills to benefit you instead of someone saying, "Oh, well, you're too sensitive or you're too deep, you're too much of a deep thinker." It's become this negative thing instead of this really positive thing of being able to channel that into your benefit, in whatever you're doing in life.
Yeah. Well, I think part is our backgrounds. I mean, I was raised by a, single mom, and she was fantastic. Um, And I never knew my father growing up. I never saw him. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I was coming back from France. Been living over there for a couple of years, and I was in an airport. I was Montreal Airport, waiting for my flight. And I was standing there waiting for my flight. And looked across the way. I saw a man standing there, and he looked very unhappy. I had a feeling about him. I don't know why. I had a feeling about him. So I'm gonna go talk to this guy. Maybe cheer him up. So I walk over to him. And as I got close to him, I had this impression I should ask him a question. So, excuse me, sir, is your name Granville? And he goes, yes, it is. How'd you know my name? I said, you're my father. And he looked at me for a long time, goes, you know, I am your father, aren't I? I said, yes, you are. And that's how we met. I'd never met him before. I mean, he left when I was a few months old, so I didn't know him. And he had no contact with the family. He moved to another part of Canada, but he was a cop. And
He was a what?
He was a police officer. And so I was, at that point, I was interested in going into law enforcement because my mom told me that he was a cop somewhere in Canada. So that was interesting. That, you know, obviously, because I mean, he wasn't interested in being my father at the time, of course, but the fact I had a chance to meet him really helped me in my life because I had a real father out there. You know, I had a stepfather who was a good man. He came along when I was a teenager, but it was different. By then, I didn't have a father. I was already a lost child, if you will, already out there doing my own thing. But fortunately, I had a wonderful mother, and I trusted her, and she just trusted me, and so I didn't want to disappoint her, and I worked really hard to do the right things. Now, I wasn't a perfect child. Wasn't a perfect child at all, but
But when
it
did
was
you learn
interesting.
that you had this gift to use influence? Like, when did that start? You know, you start putting the pieces together. Let me think, I think I could help. You know, it sounds like from the beginning you were a helper. You wanted to talk to, you can see the pain in others and wanted to help them in some way.
I think it started to coalesce when I started my PhD program. And at that same time, I started working 3/4 time at the Utah State Hospital in the forensic unit. So I was working with rapists and child molesters and pedophiles, murderers, everybody. I had them all. And so I had 2.5 years of interviewing people on the side and sitting down talking with them and listening to their stories and figuring out who's lying, who's not lying. Then I'd read their charts to see what the reality was. And I started putting these together, and I would take notes, and I kept all those notes. And I thought about these people over and over again. And so that really helped me understand how people develop. So, and in my book on serial murder, I talk about, I have this quote. It's not my quote, but I borrowed it from somebody else. I don't know who said it. What is required to live the life of one's own image? So most people are good people. Now, we might steal something when we're kids, or maybe we're a juvenile. We take something. We know it's wrong. We don't do it again. But we see ourselves as good people. Some people, maybe they'll cheat on their taxes 3 or 4 times in their lifetime, but they still see themselves as a good person, of course. I mean, you might go to, I know some of your listeners, when they go shopping and they buy fruit, right? Maybe they sample the grapes. There's no sign that says,
Guilty.
there's no sign that says free grapes, help yourself. But you
Hmm.
sample them anyway. The store doesn't care, but you take the grapes. Who pays for those grapes that you sample?
Hmm.
Who pay?
Well, we
I pay for it.
justify it.
When you rationalize, you justify it. So I pay for they raise the price of grapes to cover your theft, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I always joke around and saying, well, but if you go into a store and you buy those little Oreo cookies, they're in the thin ones in the zip top. If there's one missing, I've been there.
Hmm.
Not, I mean, I didn't do that, but I mean, there's temptations, right? So we all have our little things that we do, and nobody really cares, but we rationalize. But
Hmm.
people who commit more serious crimes, they like there's one rapist, he said, well, yeah, I did that one thing. He wouldn't even say the word rape, but he did rape her. But he said, I did that one thing. But I've lived 99% of my life, I've lived a good life. I'm a good person. And it's true. He lived a good life. So he's able to, and what men do is they tend to minimize the harm they do because they can't see themselves as being a bad person because I've lived a good life. So I really didn't, yeah, but I didn't really hurt her. It's like anybody, like domestic violence, we see the same thing. The guy, I just pushed her, yeah, but she fell down and broke her neck. And so we tend to want to minimize the damage that we do. And then it's because it's hard for us to, it's like, so let me just put it in context this way. When people commit these things, they steal, whatever, we say we are this way, but really we are good. We live good lives. We try our very best to be good people, and so that's a good thing, right? When you go and you kill your children, because we understand homicide, right? Crimes of passion. We understand that it happens. Terrible, but it does happen. But to kill your babies, so there's no place to go and say I'm a good person. So what they do is they don't just compartmentalize it. They go to a dark place in their heads, and they never come back from it. Now, between you and me and all your listeners, I call that going into the darkness, into evil, because they never come back from it. There's no therapist can fix that problem because they can never come out of that and say, yeah, I kill my babies. I'm okay. No, you can never do that. So there's this spectrum, right? And most of us live within this spectrum, within certain boundaries where we can understand people make mistakes. But then there are things that people do that, like being a serial rapist, there's no way you can justify that. Okay. Mm-hmm. But I've sat in rooms with 15 rapists who sit there and they play games with each other, trying to outsmart each other. And I watch them and I listen to them and I go, oh, this is how they do it. So the more experience you have in the field, there's always more to learn, always. But you get to put the pieces together. It wasn't until I worked on my PhD program that I really got exposed to these offenders and realized that this is the pathway I wanted to go down. Because I'm not a groupie. I'm not interested in being their buddies. I am interested in, is it possible for people, can people change? And we always want to hope that people can change. And people can change. It's rare. I mean, when people do terrible things, it's possible. But like, for example, in domestic violence, when a man tells you he's changed, we know he's lying. Always. There's no exception. They're always lying because they're trying to avoid the shame and the time, effort, costs, the messiness, accountability, all of that. And so they just want to circumvent and telling the wife, I've changed. Oh, and she's happy because, oh, good, he can come home now and it's only been 2 weeks and he's better now. But it's a lie. When does a woman know that a man's changed in domestic violence? When you tell him that he's changed. And that might take a year. And he doesn't want to go through that because you have to be honest with yourself. Has he really changed? So you watch him. And someday you'll tell him when he's changed. But when he's telling you that he's changed, he's lying. Because he doesn't, no, it's not true. It hasn't happened.
So that's how women can keep themselves safe, is by recognizing that would be your suggestion to them, where if you're in a domestic violence situation, that if the man is coming back and saying, I've changed, it's when you recognize, oh, he's done the work, he's changed.
Yeah, because you have that honeymoon phase after he hits her, right? Well, I'll go to therapy. I'll go to AA. Let's have sex. I'll give you presents. Let's bring the family in. I'll go to counseling. All these different things that they're willing to do. We'll pray together. But it's all BS. Because when he says, yeah, I'll do all that because I'm a changed man, well, then he just says these things in order to get past all that messiness to be able to come home and be normal. But it's going to happen again and again and again because change requires shame. Change requires time and effort and suffering and messiness and accountability. And it just hurts so much. And the man doesn't want to accept the fact that he actually did that. So let's avoid all that. Boom. I did a year just under somebody else's license. I wasn't licensed, but I was doing anger management because I was curious. How does this work? What a waste of time. Because you have all of these men sitting around in a circle. They're paying me once a week. They pay me to sit there and be talk about what they did, and I talked to them about what they did, and and they all were angry that they had to be there, that their ex-girlfriend should be there, the wife should be there, they shouldn't be there. And you know that if they don't pay, they go to jail. So they have a choice. So they come to me because at the time, this was many, many years ago. But you know, this is not anger management. This is just a matter of explosion later on. No one's getting better here. And there's no therapy that's going to fix them.
Right, because they don't want to do the work, right?
No, they don't want to do the work. No, a man can do the work. Some men do the work. They actually do the work. But if a man's really humble about it, he's willing to step away from the family if he needs to, live somewhere else. He's willing to actually do things. But like he said, I'll go to therapy, and they go. I've seen men say, "Well, yeah, why? What do I need to go to therapy? I don't need to go to therapy. I'm okay," because they don't want to face the reality of what's going to happen. Because the therapist, and most therapists are really good at what they do, they'll pick them apart and they'll point out some of these issues that they have, and it's hard, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a personal example if you want to know.
Sure.
So most Americans, 2/3 of Americans, spank their kids, right? They don't beat them; they spank them. Right? It's normal. It's
Even to this in 2026.
no, yeah, it's what people do. It's they don't. I'm not talking about beating them. I'm talking about spanking kids. It's been don't do it. The past 40 years, I've been monitoring it over the years. For a while, they said don't do it, and then they said it's okay to do. We know from research that it's okay to spank your kids as long as you never spank them when you're angry.
Yeah. Well, I'm not agreeing with that. I'm just saying I understand the difference
Yeah.
between what you're
if,
saying.
if you're not angry, then you're probably not going to spank them
Mhm.
because it's just what's the point, right? Because people spank them usually when they're angry. But if you wait, if you take time out, all that, I don't think spanking is the best way to raise your kids. And
Yeah.
most children who have been spanked know their parents love them. Oh yeah, my dad spanked me once in a while, but he loved me and he still loves me. And so we used to see that. But when it becomes excessive and then it turns into beatings, I mean, I've met lots of people who had never spanked, and they turn out just great without being spanked. But if you're not angry, then that's so. When I was a young parent, I occasionally spank my kids, not too often, but once in a while. And I told my son, who was 11 at the time, 11 years old, and he was my eldest child. I said, "Son, all week I've told you to clean up your room. Now, why a parent wants them? Today I'll just close the door." But back then, being a young parent, obviously whatever, I said, "Now it's Saturday. I have to go to work again on Saturday. I'll be home at 10 o'clock tonight. Make sure you clean your room or else." "Okay, Dad." I came home that night at 10 o'clock. He had not touched his room. He was on his top bunk, sound asleep. Before his feet hit the floor, I give him a good spanking. I didn't give him a bad spanking. I give him a good spanking. You understand the language here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a good spanking. It lasted maybe 10, 15 seconds. And then I put him back on his top bunk. I mean, he was still trying to wake up by the time I got finished with him. I was so angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I put him on his top bunk. End of story. No. The next day I walked by his room. And he cleaned up his room. He pushed it into a big pile in a corner. Like that's 11-year-olds do that. Like a big pile of stuff. And that's fine. It did something. So I walked in his room. And as I'm walking by his bed, I looked down and I noticed a book underneath his bed, open, face down. I was kind of curious. What's he reading? So I pulled it out. I took a peek. It wasn't a book. It was his journal, his diary. And there was my name, Dad. Would you read it? Oh, yeah. He might be planning on killing you. You want to read it, at least that page.
Mm-hmm.
And I did read it. It changed my life forever. I'm going to quote to you what he said about his father. Quote, "Yesterday, Dad spanked me again. Why is it that Dad's pain is always my pain too?" Unquote. I never spanked him again, ever. An 11-year-old child saw in me what I failed to see. I was unhappily married. I was miserable. We were having financial problems. I had no dog to kick around. And that was the core of where I was coming from. But I had him. And I realized what I was doing. I never spanked him again. Now, there were times when I wanted to. I'd take him by the shoulder and say, son, look at me. Only you can prevent child abuse. And look at me. And years later, and he's an attorney now. Years later, I was at his home visiting him, and all of a sudden I heard him yelling at the kids. And I said, remember, kids, only you can prevent child abuse. And looked at me, he smiled. He never forgot that moment.
But that's that empathy I was talking about seeing that at a young age. I mean, that's really astute.
Yes. And my
Uh,
son's like that. He reads people really, really well. Uh, uh,
right.
yeah, he's really, really good
I
at
mean,
this.
that's incredible.
Yeah, he's an attorney for AAA, and he settles things. Yeah, he said, I settle it. I make people happy. Yeah, he's
And I
really good at what
imagine he knows how, that's what I'm saying,
he
using these
does.
gifts to
He's
read people, to understand, like, there's,
he understands suffering. He does. He does.
right.
Yeah. So I think that it's as you and I'm fairly other directed. Um, um, I don't have a whole lot of interest in, for myself, material goods. I don't care about that so much. Um, but I'm much interested in relationships. For me, that's what matters in life, are relationships. I, money and cars, or I don't care about those things. What I care about, what are my relationships with my children, my grandchildren, my friends, and I think that's really, really important. And my colleagues, so I'm with my colleagues. So, like, I never lie. I, I used to tell white fibs when I was much younger.
Hmm.
And
Withholding.
yeah, withholding. I did that
Hmm.
for a while. And then I got called on it. Oh, yeah. Because, oh, I can do that. No, you can't do that. So I don't do that. So I get pulled over for speeding one day. And that's one of my faults is I speed. And the CHP says, you're going pretty fast. I said, no, I wasn't. I was speeding. And he looked at me and goes, oh, I got you 87 miles an hour in a 65. I said, no, I wasn't. I was going 93. I always tell the truth. And he looked at me and goes, why are we going so fast? I said, look at me. How much time do you think I got left? I got a place to go, things to do.
Mm,
I said, as soon as you give me my ticket, I'm going to start speeding again because
mm.
I'm late. I'm going down to Los Angeles. Why? I'm training some law enforcement down there. I said, I'm not trying to get the ticket. I'm happy to get the ticket. I just got to get going.
Mm.
He wouldn't give me a ticket. We had a great conversation about his family. I would have been happy to take the ticket. It was my time. I was in a hurry.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because on the one part, I wonder how much you can help. Like you're so skilled at reading people and knowing, like you may not even know you're doing it.
Yeah,
Because, my father was a police officer and he said, cops, people lie to him all the time.
all the time. All the time.
Don't lie. If you ever get pulled over or something ever happens, just tell the truth. And I
Mm-hmm.
know you know this. I know
Yeah,
that
always tell the
you
truth.
like saying, go ahead, give me the ticket because everybody else is going to say, I don't deserve the ticket. I wasn't speeding. And you're like, I mean,
I
I
got
kind
pulled
of
over
feel like,
recently. I got pulled over recently, and and uh, and I was going really fast. It was
mhm.
in another state, and the state patrol officer he pulls me over, and I rolled down my window. I said, "Yeah, I'm going. I'm no, no, I know I'm speeding here. I'm going pretty fast." And we started talking, and next thing I know, he tells me he's on a task force out of another place. I can't mention this on air. And what I do when I'm doing and working with kids and protecting children, and we had this conversation, and he wouldn't even give me a warning. I
That's
mean,
what I'm
oh no,
saying, Eric. I
and,
think
and I
that
was and I
you
was
you
trying.
understand people. You can't just say,
I
I,
wasn't trying to get out of the ticket.
I
I
understand. That's the power of
yeah,
using all these gifts that you've
yeah,
amassed all through. Look at you. You're like caught, caught, because
yeah.
it works. When you can read people and you have the background that you have, it's like, and especially talking to all these serial killers and psychopaths and sociopaths, like it feels like it's not a game, but it kind of becomes
It's
like
somewhat. I would pick up hitchhikers in California.
you would.
Oh yeah, for years, for several years at night, especially at night. Be-
Why?
Because if you're hitchhiking at night in California, you obviously don't have a phone, you don't have a car, you must be a criminal. I mean, they always are. And so, like one night I was driving along, it was storming, and it was raining hard, and there was really this really big guy, really scary looking guy. And oh good, so I pulled over. I said perfect. So he says he opens the door and says, "You a cop?" 'Cause I'm driving my BMW 645 at the time, and I said, "No, I'm not a cop. Get in." So he gets in. Now this is a big guy, but I've done this many times, so I know exactly what I'm going to do. Because I worked in jails and prisons and psych units, and so he gets in. I said, and I've heard this before, but I actually said it to this guy. I said, "Are you a serial killer?" Straight faced. He goes,
Hmm.
"No." I said, "Well, that's good because there's not room for two of us in the car." And off we went into the night. So I'm staying ahead of him. I know what I'm doing. So we started talking, and I said, "You look like you've just got out of prison." He goes, "I did." "How'd you know?" I said, I can smell you." So yeah,
Hmm.
it says, "Yeah, I was in jail for doing something." I said, "Oh, so for 30 minutes, I interviewed him. And he had killed a couple of people, but one in a car deal and bar fight. He wasn't a serial killer, but he killed a couple of people. He'd been in and out of prison. He was an alcoholic. Um, but we had a great conversation. But at the end of it, these hitchhikers, they're always going to ask you for money. I know that. I'm prepared for that. So as we get close to when I'm going to drop him off, I said, "I suppose you're going to need some money." He goes, "Oh, no one's ever asked me that before." "Well, I'm asking, how much do you want?" "What? How much do I want?" And he was shocked. I'm staying ahead of him. I said, "How much would you like?" He goes, "Well, could you spare $20?" I said, "No, no, no. I'll give you $100 cash." "What? $100? Why would you do that?" I said, "Well, because it's a great interview. You're going to be in my next book. Okay. Next time you see me, you'll get in my car." I said, "And so, but on one condition, because you're an alcoholic, you must make the money last for 2 days." He's laughing. I give
Hmm.
him the cash. He gets out of the car. He's laughing. He's walking away. I'm laughing. I'm alive. It works every time.
I love this because it shows me so much insight into your personality. You really love the work
Oh, I
because,
love my work. I
and
love it.
you recognize how skilled you are, but these are potentially dangerous people. So
Oh
you're
yeah,
willing
you would know,
to
a woman
put
would never want to do that.
yourself,
Yeah, it's
you're
dangerous.
willing to put yourself on the line
I've
to
interviewed
get,
rapists. I've interviewed. I know how to grow marijuana now.
but Eric, what is your motivation? What are you
Because it
ultimately?
helps me when I do interviews of suspects, when I'm working on cases. I understand criminality. I understand how people lie, different ways they lie, not just body language, but how they say things, um, how they looked at me, how they respond to me. So every time I do an interview, I feel like I'm a little bit better at what I do.
Mm,
And it's just I want to be better at what I do
mhm,
in my work. Um, I don't I don't judge offenders.
mm.
I don't. The only ones I have sometimes have problems with are people who harm children. I mean, I have to put my biases aside so I can do a neutral interview because I want to protect children, but I want to protect everybody. I want people to live and have good lives, and I want to do something. So I always tell people I train, if you can save one life, you've changed the world. Just save one life. Your career is worth it. Just think about that. If you just save one life, I mean, might spend 40 years doing it, but if you save one life, you've changed the world. Think about
Isn't that kind of reverse about what people think these days, where it's like bigger, better? Oh my gosh, I've done
it.
this. But like, really, does that message resonate with people?
Probably, well, with some people it does. I think a lot of people it doesn't because, we have so many material things people seek after, and they want to. Oh, I know so and so, and yeah, no, yeah. I guess fame is fleeting. Right? Fame is fleeting. It doesn't last, and we're here and we're gone. I mean, if you live 100 years, it's a short life.
Hmm.
As one person said, not me, but somebody said one day, he said, "Well, I'd rather have." Some people want statues. I don't want a statue. I just want someone to remember me. That I lived and I did something. And eventually I'll be gone, and people will move on to something else. Like my book on serial murder, it's it's not definitive. It's foundational. People will come along and they're doing it now. My students are doing it now. They're building upon what I've done, and they're adding to it. And that's the whole process of scientific investigation, is to build upon science and to add more to it. And so we make this place a better place to live. Where I work at Walden University, change the world. What's your why? I'm here because I want to improve society in some way. So yeah,
Well, when I purchased your book, which I should be getting in the next couple of days, which I'm very excited about.
yeah,
Let's plug your book, by the way. What is it called?
it's
You
called
told me to get the seventh edition. So,
yes. So it's called Serial Murderers and Their Victims, seventh edition.
okay.
It's
So I,
Cengage Publishers. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So when I was looking at the reviews, they were incredible. They're like, I've never read anything like this. This is the most interesting thing. It's totally different. And I can just tell based on, you've got a smile on your face. And it's like, you're going to approach it in a way like what I saw, getting back to the reel that I saw you in, when you had that spark in your eye and you were like, I understand, because it feels like you're approaching things from a way different. You surprise people by, let me give you $100. I'm not going to just give you 20. I'm going to give you 100. You just got out of prison. I can smell it. Like, you wouldn't, you're driving a BMW. Like you love to surprise people. Maybe that's the thing that you've realized, of like, people expect you to be
A little bit of
something.
that. I got in a car, Uber driver, 3 or 4 years ago. In fact, it was in Milwaukee, and I got in the car immediately. I was in the back seat, but immediately I saw this guy, the driver, and said, "Oh, this guy's been in prison. I can tell." He had this look about him, I had this sense about him. And so I said, "So how much time have you done?" He goes, "What?" I said, You've been in prison, haven't you?" He goes, "How'd you know that?" I said, "Trust me, I know what I'm talking about." He goes, "How much time?" He said, "Well, I did 3 years." I said, No, you did a lot more than that." He goes, "Okay, I did 30 years. I said, "For what?" He says, "I was a serial bank robber. I wore a mask, had a gun, and robbed a lot of banks. And I got caught and went to prison, and I did 30 years in prison for it." So he's in my speed dial on my phone. I can call him anytime, and if like I've had murderers, child molesters, I've had other offenders, a serial arsonist who will come to my classes, or they'll call in, and I'll have my students, whether they're soldiers or they're other people, other students, who will get to interview them on my phone or in person. And so they get to ask questions that they couldn't ask before. That's what I do. And I always give them, and I always pay them for it. I always give them something to thank them for coming to my class, or being interviewed by phone. Yeah.
You mean when they come to speak to your students?
Yes. For example, there's a man who, when he was 17, this is out of Indiana, when he was 17 years old, he killed a gay man. And this guy was a 4.0 student. His father was a math teacher at the high school, and a nice kid, and smart, and so he killed this, and you didn't even know him, so he got 60 years in prison. 60 years for it. He shot him several times with a 22. It didn't kill him, so he took an axe and chopped him up, and that was the cause of death, axe murder. And this guy's like 5'2", and I just so happened that I was teaching a bunch of lifers at the prison at the time, and parents heard about me somehow and asked me if I would go talk to their son, their 17-year-old son. He was in the fish tank at the prison because he wasn't old enough to actually be in the main population because he was too young. So they were holding him in the fish tank. So I'm sitting there interviewing him and talking to him. I wasn't really interviewing, but I was. And I said, "Aren't you concerned about Bubba? You're in prison and you're just a little guy. Bubba's going to take care of you. You know what I mean?" He goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
no, I'm not worried about that. When they find out what I've done, nobody's going to bother me." And then he noticed I was looking at his hands. He had a lot of nicotine stains on his fingers. I said, "Oh." He looked at me and says, "Please don't tell my mother that I'm smoking cigarettes." Now, here's a man who did an axe murder, a 17-year-old. He's concerned about his mother knowing he's smoking. That got my attention. So I took his file, because I left about a month later, I moved away, and I put that file in my file cabinet. I said, someday I'm going to look him up again. 30 years go by. I looked him up. He's out. While in prison, he did 26 years in prison. He earned 2 master's degrees in prison. And he was at Tulane University finishing up his PhD. Just 2 months ago, he finished his PhD. And so it was amazing. So I called him. And so I've had him on phone call into my classes and talk to my students, my soldiers, and they get to interview him. Now, can people change? Yes. He wants to go back with his PhD and he wants to improve the prison system, better education for inmates. I think that's fantastic. And so we're good friends. Now I'm going to have him come on my show. I'm going to invite him to be on my show. Not talk about his crime, but now he's a professional. Now he's got a PhD. He's going to go and talk about what you want to do now to make this world a better place. Can people change? Yes. And he's made those changes. And I really respect that. And people can change. Some people won't change. Some people will. Like sexual predators, they're not going to change.
Mm-hmm. What did he ever say? What made him kill the man?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother conversation.
Okay.
But yes, at the time when he said, when I pulled the trigger and shot him, when I told the police, I really didn't know why I killed him. Well, I know why he did it now. When I interviewed him, I think he's had a hard time accepting that. When he was a young man, he had a friend who was like 3 or 4 years older than him, who molested him many times. And then one day the guy just moved away and never spoke to him again. His uncle passed away, who died of AIDS. And of course, this guy, he hated men, hated gay men because he's thinking, well, these gays caused my uncle to die of AIDS. And so he hated them. And he was very conflicted. Very conflicted. Lived in a very religious home. So he had a lot of conflict going on in his head. He just knew that he had to go kill a gay man. He didn't even know the guy. So in fact, he had a list of several other gay men that he was going to kill. Fortunately, he got caught after the first one. This is a young man now who's in his 50s who can help change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he paid a terrible price. Everybody did, but now he's made some changes in his life, and I respect that.
Well, we were going to talk about Manny, but we haven't even Manny Cortez, but you've been so generous with your time. It's like already an hour in, but let's talk about your podcast before I want to plug it.
Okay.
And
We'll have to do the man another time if you want.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Sure. So my podcast is it's Dark Matters, called darkmatterspodcast.com. And we're on YouTube. I guess other places. I don't really, Spotify, place like that.
Mm-hmm.
My tech guy, Frankie, he's the one that handles all that. But yes, so I'm there.
Well, we'll put links in our show notes and to your podcast, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Especially, you're going to be helping me on the second season of Stolen Voices, a new case that I'm diving into. So I'm so excited about that.
Sure.
But is there anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
It's been let me say this. I've been interviewed a lot of times. I've been in over at least 60 documentaries in my career so far. Yeah. So I've done a lot of interviewing over the years. And so I rate my interviewers. Yeah, I do. I can't help it. I do. I've had some horrible interviews. Most are really good. You are excellent. You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you've done a super job.
You know what? That's like, considering what you do and how good you are, like I'm like feeling really good. So thank you. I'm like driving 90 miles an hour.
Yeah, well, you did a great job. So I appreciate that. It's always nice it makes it so much easier to talk to people when, first of all, I know you understand what I'm talking about. And when I sense that you understand what I'm talking about, I get kind of excited about that. Okay, they understand what this is, so I can actually tell you what I think.
I mean, it's not, this work is not for everyone.
No, it's not for
And
everybody.
and a lot of people, I mean, for me personally, my excitement comes from obviously being a journalist and, investigator and finding things and putting things together and all of that. But then also like the next level for true crime, as I mentioned before, in terms of like women's issues and taking this, all this information that we have and like how can we use this to better our lives, you
Yes.
know? And
Yeah, how
that's
can women? How can they? How can women protect themselves? And Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. Pay attention to your fear. Use common sense. Um, and most
but
women
not
do.
only that, not just in a fear way, but in a way of like
Sensing. You got to be able to sense things.
sensing, but
Yeah.
using these skills in our day-to-day existence for good, like what you've been able to do, where you're like talking, you're able to
When I
get
get
out
on,
of tickets, you're able to get interviews,
see, I
I
don't
mean,
try
these are
to.
really these
Yeah.
skills that women I think naturally have and have built on are amazing skills. Like and like owning those skills I think is like anyway, I it gets me really
Yeah.
excited about it.
When I'm in airports or get on a plane, I always look at everybody. I always look. I just want to be sure who's there because I would look to see if anybody I might be concerned about. Um, when I walk down the street, I'm always looking at people, looking, just seeing if there's anybody I would be. I know once in a while I think, oh yeah, this is that guy. I need to watch this guy. Yeah,
I know
sometimes
it makes it hard to turn it off though. For me, it's hard to turn it off. Like I have to not look
I
at
never.
people so I want to turn it off sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I never turn it off.
You never turn it off. I
No,
believe that. I
no.
believe
Even
that.
when I
Eric,
even when I go to church,
you
even at
never,
church.
well, you definitely want to look at it when you
Yeah,
definitely want
you
to
never
figure it
know,
out when
right?
you're at church.
Because I've had experiences, right? And I know, and people make assumptions that when you go to church, everyone's safe, and we know that predators know that, and so they'll go and fit right in.
I know that's why I said that because it's
Yeah,
like that what you think you should be looking for really is not what well, you should be looking for that too, but it's people who present as like the nicest people in the world, like what you said. I mean, and
well,
you can't go around thinking everybody's out to do you harm, but I think it's
no,
great to
who's most likely to be sexually involved with their clients or patients in the healthcare community? All healthcare providers. Who's most likely to be sexually involved with their clients or patients?
are you going to say the psychiatrist?
Yeah, they're number one.
Okay, that's what, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then who's number two? Nurses, probably male nurses primarily. Number three, psychologists. Number
Hmm.
four are therapists, generally counselors. When you take psychiatrists and psychologists together, add them together, from a meta-analysis of 7 national studies, 10% of them are involved sexually with their clients and patients. 10%.
Because they know how to manipulate.
Exactly.
I
It's like,
know.
yeah, you get a few obstetricians, you get a few, other healthcare providers, dentists, and so, but not many compared to that group because they manipulate people.
They
They can.
do.
Most don't, but
And the people that go to them are vulnerable and they're
yes,
not thinking this is a predator. This is someone who's supposed to help me.
that's right.
I know.
I did a
Anyway, this
whole,
is
yeah.
fantastic. I will send you
Oh,
a link when it comes out and I will be in touch with Stolen Voices.
looking
Thank you
forward
so
to it.
much. Have a great weekend.
It's a pleasure. Great.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
I really want to thank Dr. Hickey for his time and insights. And again, I'm going to say this, I love his curiosity and passion for the work. And you can find links to his book, Serial Murderers and Their Victims, 7th edition, and we'll also have links to his Dark Matters podcast in our show notes. And please check out our Criminal Mischief YouTube channel at EVO Creative. There you'll find the video version of my interview with Dr. Hickey. But stick around because up next on our Criminal Mischief bonus content, my co-host Brandon Morgan and I will continue the conversation about my interview with Dr. Hickey. I'll try to bring down the excitement level, but it was really fun and challenging and I have a lot of thoughts on it. But we'll also talk about what's next for Luigi Mangione. Now, last week, Mangione pleaded guilty to federal stalking charges in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Mangione admitted in court to shooting Thompson in a plea deal that resolves the federal case against him. But what could this mean for the state's upcoming murder trial? So Brandon and I are going to unpack all of this right now. Our bonus content is available in our Criminal Mischief feed. And as always, thanks for listening. From Pie in the Sky Media, Criminal Mischief is an EVO production, recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We're produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For EVO Creative, I'm Carolyn Ossorio, your writer and host.